Hello there, I'm Begalius. Good morning to you. A slightly more somber video today, despite the chipper intro. It's a sunny day, so that's what happens to me. But unfortunately, yesterday, I watched Moist Critical, Charlie's new video about himself, where he addresses the issues that he's got into. And I want to talk about that. I want to talk about it because this is something I actually was going to speak about on a separate sort of term, but I decided not to for the reasons that I'm going to present in this video. But I do want to say that if this is going to get political, I'm going to tell you that straight off the bat. If you don't want a political conversation, don't tune in. And I will say, just in case you didn't know, that I'm left-wing. I'm very much left-wing, and so that's where the political conversation is going to go. If you don't agree, then I've already warned you. I'm sorry, that's on you. But I watched the video, and it was... above all else, sad. It was really sad to watch because it felt like an amalgamation of the cause and effect of this giant wave that's happening currently, particularly in terms of the internet, but just in general, this big wave that's going on of change, and not a good change. And I think one of the sad things about it is that I recognized it on a far more micro level, on a very micro level. I recognized what he was talking about and the feelings that he experienced, because largely what he was talking about was these sort of very hyperbolic, unnecessarily brash, mean-spirited comments and arguments and situations that people are getting themselves into. And again, on a very micro level, I've experienced something relatively similar to this, which is that when I rebooted this channel, the idea was to give my opinion on things and, comment on the world and what have you. And when I started doing that, I immediately got just unhinged, awful, horrible comments, just bad faith arguments and what have you. I'll see if I can find some here. And the sad thing is, I've been doing this since 2011. I've been doing this for God knows how long. I don't know why my voice turned into an old man's voice there, but 13 years I've been doing this damn thing, and I have never experienced comments like this. And there was a huge, definite change when I came back to this. And I can show you examples of that too. I remember comments back in the day, they'd be, you might get the occasional hate comment here or there, but it was mostly just like talking about what the subject matter of the video, whether they agree or disagree. But a lot of it would be like G'ing you up or talking about how they're excited for what you're going to do next, blah, blah, blah. And you get none of that now. It's changed so much. And like I said, this is like a fraction of what Moist Critical would be experiencing, so I can kind of relate to what he's talking about. But how do we get here? Oh, well, this is where things get political. So there's a whole timeline for this that, again, I was going to speak about on my own terms. And it's funny because during the video, Charlie mentioned there's one tiny little part in the 24-minute video, one little sentence that I want to home in on, one thing that he just an offhand comment. He said things have got a lot worse in the last couple of years, in the last 2 years or so. In the last couple of years, things have got worse. That was very important to me. And that was something that I was going to talk about in my video. This is something that needs talking about. So there are two, listen, I've been on the internet. I'm a millennial. I've been on the internet since before you were born. Over 20 years I've been on the internet. And I can tell you there were two major shifts in the opinion of the internet, in the sort of change of the internet. And those happened in 2016 and 2022. Now, the eagle-eyed viewers of you will know exactly what I'm leading into here. And if you don't like that, again, you can back out right now. But yes, 2016 was the Donald Trump campaign run. And 2022 was when Musk took over Twitter. Now, 2022 was a bigger one, a more influential one. You need to understand how important Twitter was, and I guess still to an extent currently is. It was considered like the online global forum. It's where people came to view their opinions. Whether you liked it or not, or whether you like it now or not, it was hugely influential and the global forum. So in 2016, we saw a big shift when Trump was running for the campaign. Essentially, what happened was his campaign advisors had come up with this plan to weaponize and use misinformation and hysteria. And this was basically the driving force behind the campaign. Whether you believe it or not, it's up to you. But I've had multiple accounts corroborating that this was the plan of the campaign crew and that they had worked on something similar in the past. They basically saw things like Pizzagate and Gamergate and noticed that if you find people who are willing to, insert themselves into misinformation, you can basically guide them in any direction you want. And when they speak, they don't speak, they shout and they spread that information as far as it will go. You don't need to run that campaign if people are going to run it for you. And you don't need to come up with things that are believable when they'll believe anything you say. It's an uncapped audience, a very rife audience, one that you can really manipulate as much as you want. And that's what happened. And of course, in order to pander to that, in order to exacerbate that and get people spirited and angry and, shouting, you had to spread everything you can. You had to spread all of the misinformation you can in the most hyperbolic way possible. So, of course, Trump latched onto that, or his campaign crew latched onto that and said controversial things that they knew were controversial, and behaved in a controversial way. I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of the things that came out were intentional, like grab her by the pussy and stuff like that. Be as controversial as possible. And if you get hold of the right people, then they'll be okay with it, and they'll be hysterical, and they'll act as though there's nothing they can do to help themselves but attach themselves to this person. And that's how the campaign worked. Of course, unfortunately, this led to him winning, and clearly it was very effective. I mean, say what you want, but objectively speaking, it worked. And then throughout the following years, things sort of continued along that path. You had the Trump supporters who still spoke that way, but you also had a large influx of people to back, to fight that back, and, grab a hold of that and get annoyed. And then in 2022, I don't know what happened to initiate this. I don't know what the lead up was. I don't know if it was just Tate or there was something else going on. But as things were slowly escalating, some people got a hold of the notion that you can push that way further and get way more out of it. You can take that kernel of an idea and exacerbate it as far as it will go, stretch it out, and get even more attention. And unfortunately, that clearly worked. Andrew Tate became, a multi-millionaire. I know he was very wealthy to begin with, but he was adding zeros to the end of his figures. He was an international name. People were going absolutely nuts over the name of this guy. And all he had to do was say horrible, despicable things. That's all he had to do. And following that, we saw people latch onto that and do the same and try to get a bite of the apple itself. Well, of course, Musk accidentally bought Twitter in 2022. Now, one thing a lot of people forget is this guy who wanted to buy Twitter to give everyone freedom of speech tried everything he could to back out of the deal because, frankly, it was a money pit and they were losing money hand over fist. So he didn't want to do it. They forced him into the deal. He had to buy Twitter. And so what can he do? Follow suit, do exactly the same. But he has a whole platform to do it on. He has a captive audience already there. All he has to do is say a bunch of controversial things and suddenly everyone's talking about him. He is the big figure and all of his stocks go up because his name is on everyone's mouth. Well, that was the idea anyway. That was the plan. I genuinely think that a lot of the things that he posts are intentionally incorrect or intentionally stupid. They're definitely intentionally inflammatory. I saw him post about how, immigrants were coming over because that's a fresh stock of people to vote Democrat. And of course they can't vote. They're immigrants. They're not US citizens. That makes no sense. And I think he knows that. I think he's just saying things for the sake of attention. But yeah, this led to a currency of attention. And that was very dangerous. That led to snowballing on a level that you would not believe. It turned from a snowball into a avalanche of people just trying their best to get a bite of the apple. We saw the reemergence of the Daily Wire, Ben Shapiro, Jordan Peterson, Tom McDonald, all of these people just trying to get a bite of the apple. And it was working. And it still is working. All of these people have absolutely been able to utilize this horrible movement for attention and get as much money as they can in the currency of attention. And that's where we're at now. Now, how does this relate? Well, I think it speaks for itself, to be honest with you. It made people crazy. It made people absolutely incensed, to the point where, because the problem is it stacks, right? It stacks and it stacks and it stacks and it stacks, but it's an arms race. It will always be an arms race. So it's who can say the more extreme thing. I need to say something more extreme. I need to say something more extreme. I need to say something more extreme. But in doing so, like I said, it's a magnet. It's a snowball, an avalanche, and people latch on. And there are people who genuinely agree with this. There are genuinely people who do think this, but they're mixed in with that are people who are trying to say the most extreme thing that they possibly can. And overall, that creates like this atmosphere of hostility and pushing it and pushing it and pushing it and pushing it. But the big thing about all of this is that we are humans. We're human beings. And when we see people behaving stupidly or saying something bad or hyperbolic or wrong, we just can't help ourselves. We have to say something about it. We have to comment on it. So that attention that we're garnering from saying controversial things is being exacerbated by people saying, no, you're stupid. Shut up. Stop being such an idiot. You're doing harm. And that's what they want. That's how you get people speaking about you, is you get people to retaliate. Conversations are not one way. They're more than one way. And the way that marketing works is not just that you feed something to one person. It has to be spread. And the best way to spread is to keep bouncing back off of what people are saying or doing. And that's what happened here. So you end up with this huge crowd of people who are divided down the middle. You have people who are saying things for attention, hyperbolic things for attention. And then you see other people calling them stupid and responding to them and telling them that what they're saying is wrong. But ultimately, you have two halves of the same conversation. It's the same conversation. This is why the conversations have become so hyperbolic, and this is why you just can't say anything. You can't say anything. This is why Moist Critical was on a call with a influencer where he had to argue that we shouldn't remove the age of consent. Now, again, some people do genuinely believe this, and I honestly think that Sneeko is someone who believes what he says, unfortunately. But his ability to say something so extreme and for it to not really matter, for him to not get absolutely eviscerated, that's where we're at. Extreme opinions and views have become normal, and responding to these extreme opinions and views has become normal too. And how do you respond to extreme opinions and views? As extremely as you can. Unfortunately, that's where we're at. This is the situation that we're in. Everything is very over the top and very crazy. Everything is absolutely crazy, and I don't know how we get away from this. I really don't. Whether it takes Twitter to be shut down, which quite frankly I think it should be at this point, but I don't know if the damage has already been done. I think people know the currency of attention, and I think people feel certain ways because of the backlash of this, and I don't think that's going to go away. So I think it's a sad situation that Charlie's in. I think he dealt with it well. You know, in terms of the trans thing, again, you know, he spoke about how he was sort of ambushed by Sneeko, and Sneeko said, should we chop children's dicks off? And of course he thought it was a conversation about, you know, whether being trans is okay. And of course there's a legal age barrier behind when you can begin to transition, but that's not the way the internet saw it, because the most extreme path is to just take it at face value. I do kind of feel for him, but at the same time, he's tremendously successful, so who cares? But yeah, it's just a sad situation. Anyway, I'll see everyone later.
The PlayStation's only $149, and you can also get leading titles.